an MOU with Vyasa, Bangalore, whose Chancellor Dr. H.R. Nagendra visited our institute, and a workshop on yoga was organized last year. By inclusion of yoga in lifestyle of technologists, nurses, physicians, faculty members, and students, the healthcare delivery can be revitalized and scientific validation of the disease specific yoga protocol can be used for reduction of treatable disorder based on sound scientific evidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jagatram, for an excellent and very enlightening and compelling welcome address, and also flagging the importance of integrative medicine. We will now move to the next stage. But before we do that, I would like to just let you know that the people who were practicing with us not only included the faculty and staff of PGI, but also the COVID warriors, people who had recovered from a recent outbreak of the disease, and those who were nursing them. So it was such a pleasure to see them all, and I hope you all saw that with us. Now we will move to our lead speaker. We welcome Dr. David Fraley, who's also called Pandit Vamadev Shastri. That is his new name. He's a Vedic teacher or a Vedacharya and the author of 40 published books on yoga and Ayurveda. And he has also translated this into 20, these are available in 20 languages worldwide. So Vamadeva has received Padma Bhushan, the third highest civilian award of the government of India recently, for his Vedic educational work. He has a degree in literature, D.Lit, from S. Vyasa, Swami Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhan Sansthan, that our director just now mentioned, with whom we have a MOU also. And he received a National Eminence Award from South India Educational Society. He is the director of American Institute of Vedic Studies in the United States, which offers publication and courses in Vedic knowledge systems. He is associated with Vedic organizations worldwide, and is regarded one of the pioneers in the global spread of yoga and Ayurveda over the last several decades. The topic he is going to speak on is a very interesting topic and more relevant to not only yoga, but COVID times that we are witnessing. He's going to be talking of the yoga and Ayurveda psychology and its relevance in the post-COVID era, which signifies that yes, we are transiting into we are probably going to overcome COVID soon. And there is a plan Dr. Frawley has for the post-COVID era. We are very happy, and on behalf of our director, dean, and faculty, staff, students, we welcome you to give your keynote address. Over to you, Vamadevji.
Namaste, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. It is my great honor to be with all of you on this special day, this International Yoga Day. I am happy to be with PGI Chandigarh. I've been through Chandigarh many times, also to Himachal, through Haryana, through Punjab. And so it is a very area close to me. I want to thank Dr. Jagatram, the director of this very important institute, Dr. Gigi Puri, the dean, Dr. Gurupreet Singh, dean also, and of course the faculty, staff, and students of PGI Chandigarh, and all the people who have come to this particular event today through this webinar, and also who are gathering together throughout the world on this International Day of Yoga, the 6th since it became recognized by the United Nations. But yoga has been going on in India for many thousands of years. It's at the very origins of the Indic Dharmic civilization. And it is also spreading worldwide. It has been adapted everywhere. And it is helping people at many levels of spirituality and medicine. It is also the day coming up of the summer solstice, and we connect yoga with the sun. In the Vedas, the sun is the Purusha, the Atma, the self of all, and also the ultimate source of prana and well-being. So that time of light, light of awareness, light of prana, light of consciousness is with us. So let us draw that into ourselves and into our world as much as possible. Now, we live in a very critical time period. Coronavirus, COVID-19, it has various names. And what we've seen fairly quickly over a short period of time is a single virus invade almost the entire planet, partly through the technology that allows us to travel, moving from airport to airport, partly, who knows, its origin. And what we see is this coronavirus has affected most strongly Western Europe and the Northeastern United States, the most educated, affluent, and the best countries, regions with the best medical systems in the world. And it has caused a great deal of problems there, as well as globally as a whole. India is also struggling with it. India, of course, contains 1/6 of the population of the world. So the numbers here in India always tend to appear larger than what they may be in other areas, but it is a definite threat. The virus targets those with weak immunity, whether caused by age, pre-existent health conditions, cardiovascular conditions, lung diseases, or those who are repeatedly exposed to the disease. Many of the people who pick up the disease will not come down with significant symptoms. The current statistics show globally that only 1% are showing significant symptoms of those who test positive for the disease. But unfortunately, they can also carry it on to others. So what I want to address today is yoga at a psychological and immunity level, including Ayurveda, physical and psychological immunity. But for that, I also want to put yoga into another perspective. I view yoga as a science of consciousness. This is not just my view. I remember Sri Aurobindo, so many others have said that. In modern medicine, we have body, brain, you have mind and consciousness. In most of modern medicine, mind is considered to be a function of the brain, and brain is the ultimate source, and consciousness as a function of the mind, function of the brain, and defined largely by brain chemistry, on which, of course, we produce many new pharmaceutical drugs to help maintain the chemical balance in the brain. That is the view of the outer science, but the inner science of yoga teaches us that the body and also the brain, in the guiding force of the body, is an instrument of the mind. The mind has its own connection, but is also separate from the body. And consciousness, meanwhile, is a function, I should say, the mind, meanwhile, is a function of consciousness, an instrument of consciousness. Consciousness transcends body and mind as its instruments, which become the forms of its expression. So what this means is we also have an inner way of working on brain, mind, consciousness, on working on our psychology connected to the yogic spirituality. And here too, Ayurveda comes into play, and Ayurveda teaches us that the body is not just structure and chemistry that we emphasize in the modern medicine. The body is also energy, energy defined by doshas, vata, pitta, kapha, energy defined by prana. The body also contains information through the mind. The body also contains nature's intelligence, which is how all the organs and systems of the body function without our personal interference or attempt to control. And the body also contains consciousness, at least at a subliminal level. So in other words, we have inner ways of working on our brain, mind, consciousness, and on dealing with health and dealing with immunity. Physical immunity is defined by our ability to withstand pathogens, disease-causing factors externally, but even energies, hot and cold, dampness, dryness that can disturb our organic equilibrium. And we also have a psychological immunity, which is our ability to withstand stress, difficulties, obstacles, emotional problems in the external world. Now, this particular COVID virus, of course, is threatening our physical immunity. For that, we're looking for a vaccine, or we're looking for certain other chemicals to help us overcome that. But there are also organic means of overcoming that, like we have in Ayurveda, through dietary changes, through certain herbs, through developing or strengthening what we call the ojas, which is the primary vitality behind the 7 tissues that the body is composed of in Ayurvedic thought: the plasma, the blood, the muscle, the fat tissue, the bone, the nerve, the reproductive. There's an inner core of immunity or ojas based upon both congenital factors and also based upon how we live and how we use our energy. And it is the prana that allows that ojas or inner immunity to function, how we have the prana within ourselves, how we connect to the prana in nature, how we can work with the prana through the breath, how the prana carries our body awareness, even in the state of deep sleep. So yoga as a science of consciousness, and with Ayurveda also a science of prana. We recognize that behind all these discrete functions of the body on so many different levels, cellular levels, all the complex nerve reactions and synapses, that there is a deeper level of holistic powers, energies, and forces. What keeps the body together is that there is a unitary prana governing all these outer movements. And behind that unitary prana is a mind, a consciousness, and ultimately a self or inner being, Atma or Purusha. And that prana, though it is connected to the physical life, that prana also is connected to the cosmic life. It is connected to the many lives of the jiva. And our consciousness is also connected to the whole of life. So what does yoga teach us, and how does it even define itself? As we know through Yoga Sutras, that the yoga is the chitta vritti nirodha. Nirodha is often regarded as negation, silence, mastering, controlling, stopping, mastery of the mind. I like to look at it in a fairly simple way. The nirodha, or control of the mind, is also detachment, or more specifically, disidentification with the mind. You are not the mind. the mind is a function of Prakriti, or the forces of nature. It is your instrument that you are carrying and that you work with in the present birth. And because of that, yoga moves to the other phase, tadadrashtu sarupe avasthanam, abiding in the nature of the seer who witnesses the mind. And whoever witnesses something has a certain difference or detachment from it. Viveka, vairagya, discernment between the seer and the seen, detachment between the seer and the seen. Ordinarily, we are able to detach ourselves from external things that we see through our senses, watching a river flow, watching the clouds in the sky. However, we are not able to detach ourselves from the movement of the mind and the movement of the senses. We get caught in our thoughts, our emotions, even external sensations, particularly things that may affect us at a physical level or may cause us pleasure or pain. So if we go back to that state of the seer or the witness, then we have an inner immunity in consciousness because we are observing the scene. And here the scene being both the body and the mind, and not simply reacting to them, or being carried away by our emotions involved. So this is very important. So what I would like to do is look at the process of yoga and the different limbs of yoga as to how they affect our immunity, particularly at a psychological level. And what we see with the coronavirus, that many people who are not directly or physically affected by the disease are strongly affected psychologically in terms of Ayurveda, Vata dosha disorders, fear, anxiety, insomnia, ungroundedness, disequilibrium, uncertainty, confusion. These are there. Even in terms of Pitta dosha, we see people who are now angry, upset, reacting, sometimes even violently, as you've seen recently in the United States, where people took to looting in a number of the major cities of the country, or even in terms of kapha dosha, with not only depression, but lethargy, dullness, heaviness, attachment, sorrow. We see that when we have to stay home alone, we have to face our own minds. And many of us have not done that. We're so busy being stimulated outwardly by the senses, we don't know what's going on in our minds. Our minds may be breeding fear, worry, anxiety, anger, so many things, but we brush it aside. We don't look at it. We are entranced in our work, our entertainment, our outer activity at various levels. So the psychological challenge of the COVID virus are also there. They are there, of course, with the disease, when there is a death, when there is someone in the hospital. These also trigger all the psychological mechanisms. Now, Yoga Sutras itself carries an important theory of psychological disease. This is called the Klesha theory, the Pancha Kleshas. And in that, yoga teaches us that the mind is created, or the mind functions out of these five disturbing factors that can cause pain and suffering. First is avidya, which people call ignorance, but which actually literally means not knowing. And I like to define it a little bit differently. This ignorance, or avidya, is the limited knowledge that we have through the mind, the senses, and the body. We are, after all, embodied creatures. We have sensory limitations. We have vitality limitations. We only live so long. We are in a realm of limitation. There is much that we don't know, but there's also certain things that we do know. And sometimes we think we know more than we actually do. Today, in the information age, we have tons of information, more information than ever, but we don't actually know more inwardly. We don't have the inner intelligence, the direct awareness, direct understanding to go along with it. So that ignorance causes us to develop egoism or arrogance. We think we know what we do not know, and this results in wrong judgment, what is called prajna parada in Ayurvedic thought. We take what is good for us to be bad for us, or what is bad for us to be good for us. We get caught up in raga dvesha, or the dualities of the mind. You can see that psychologically as these bipolar instances in the extreme form. But the mind and the emotions are always going to go back and forth: attraction, repulsion, love, hate, like, dislike, going back and forth like a pendulum. The more you swing it to one side, the more it comes back to the other side. And then the mind function through this avidya leads us to the abhinavesha, which is this deep-seated clinging and attachment, and basically getting caught up in all this dualistic currents of the mind, all the strivings of life, all the outer needs. So we are caught in the drama of Maya and samsara rather than understanding our inner nature. So yoga says that to go beyond sorrow, we have to remove that core avidya and go back from the mind to our deeper awareness or inner self. And here, let us examine the 8 limbs of yoga. We have the yamas and niyamas. And I like to define these as the basic principles and practices of psychological health and well-being, which constitute the universal dharma, or the right way of living. We certainly don't have time to go into all of these, but just simply to address them briefly. If we have ahimsa, not wishing harm to any other creature, we also remove the forces of harm in our own psychology. A lot of our psychology, its negativity, is based upon gossip, negativity, jealousy, envy, and seeking to disrupt or control other people. So removing that, we remove one of the main causes of psychological suffering just in our ordinary behavior. Satya, truthfulness. If we are truthful with others, we will be truthful with ourselves, and we will see the truth and know what is real. And I just also would then mention briefly santosha. If we are content, then we have the psychological equilibrium to deal with negativity. So yamas, niyamas are basic factors of behavioral medicine and psychological well-being. We must develop our lifestyle there. And then when we move into the asana practice, asana is also detachment from the body, relaxation from bodily tension and stress, which is also letting go of the pathogens, and which is also strengthening physical immunity. If the physical body is in a still and quiet, relaxed, interiorized sense, then our inner ojas, our inner stability, the stiratva within us is going to be more. And we will, as the Yoga Sutra says, then we'll be able to handle the dualities, heat and cold, and disturbances externally. Pranayama. Our immunity is based upon prana, and this is both our physical immunity and also our psychological immunity, because prana and mind are connected, as they say, like the two wings of a bird, with the prana as the power of action and the mind as the power of knowledge. They go together. We can, through pranayama, breathe away our mental disturbances, negative emotions, and toxins. We can draw the mind inwardly into the heart, into the core of our being, and connect to our inner divinity. And we have an inner prana, a prana that exists behind deep sleep, an inner prana, a unitary prana, through which we can connect with cosmic and environmental forces of healing. And we must also connect to the prana nature. And I've also said that we cannot have immunity and resistance to disease as a species if we've destroyed or if we've damaged the integrity of the ecosystem, which is the pranic sphere, the biosphere, the atmosphere of the planet. So the ecological factor comes in here as well. Pratyahara is a key factor of immunity because our immunity psychologically is disrupted by the senses. In Ayurveda, after Prajnaparada, the wrong use of the senses is the main cause of disease. And throughout the world today, we are overstimulating our senses. We are having very powerful positive and negative impressions, colors, lights, music. Many people are wired up through the whole day and being electrified, you might say, through the senses. Only if we can turn our senses within, only if we can use our senses in a contemplative manner and detach the mind from sensory reactions, can we have psychological and mental well-being and go beyond psychological sorrow. As long as we're filling our mind with disturbed impressions, I also say what junk food does to the body, junk impressions does to the mind. Our nutrition to the mind through the senses is very important, and that should be sattvic. Another statement I like to make is we let people into our minds that we would never let into our homes because we are not guarding our senses with the proper pratyahara. We should have the strength of willpower not to be overcome by external sensory impulses. And we need to unite and strengthen our senses through developing the third eye, the inner power of hearing, shravana. And again, going out into nature, opening to the sensory beauty and sattvic power of nature with a receptive and contemplative mind, rather than this rajasic, tamasic mind that we have that's always running after pleasure, stimulation, or just simply dulling itself out externally. Dharana is the key factor for the immunity of the mind. In fact, we could call the immunity of the mind psychologically as our Dharana Shakti. And I would also define Dharana Shakti as the power of attention. You know, we have an educational system today that fills people with information, but it doesn't cultivate power of attention, concentration to use that information. We're overly stimulated through the senses, so our Dharana Shakti now is less than a second or maybe a few seconds. And every little thing from the external world can disturb us because we have no inner stillness and power or Dharana Shakti. We haven't cultivated the buddhi or the inner intelligence properly. So it's very important that we recognize our power of attention is the most important thing. Don't give your power of attention away easily. And whatever you give your power of attention away to can control you and condition you from the outside. So today in the modern world, there's so little power of attention that we can have pandemic fear, pandemic anxiety. along with the real pandemic disease, we don't have the inner power to take care of that. And that's what yoga teaches us, ekagra chitta, one-pointed mind, one-pointed awareness, moment by moment awareness. And then the yoga takes us to the dhyana as meditation, or the expanded state of awareness. I like to connect dharana with seeing. It's holding to a particular point. It is a focus. I like to connect dhyana or meditation with hearing, particularly inner hearing, shruti, because it is a kind of expansive peripheral awareness. And in this dhyana meditational state, again, we observe, we rest in the state of the seer, and we give space, we give everything its own place. In fact, the mind needs space to heal itself. And one of the problems of all the psychological issues we have is our minds have become too much two-dimensional and too much stimulated externally. And even here, when we are staying at home as part of the social distancing, we must remember two things from yoga. One, we must remember the meditation, the internalization of awareness. And we must remember that the entire universe also dwells within us. We must develop our inner vision. Along with that, we need to have some proper sources of sattvic impressions, flowers, plants, pujas, rituals, so many things that we can do. We should make sure that we're not caught in a negative, disturbed sensory field, or dull, or just simply no stimulation at all. And that we give the proper inner space to the mind, because it's hard for us to give the outer space to the mind. Another thing that we are doing is the wearing of the masks in the social distancing, which is very important. But we must remember, from the yogic standpoint, we must compensate that with pranayama during the day as well. Because if we're breathing in our own waste breath, the waste air, the apana vayu, we are then weakening our own immunity in the process. So we need the daily pranayama to counter the disturbances of the limited breathing through the masks. And we need the daily meditation, and also pratyahara, dharana, all of that, to counter the limitation of proper sensory, sattvic sensory influences that we have coming in to us. Along with that, Ayurveda teaches us about right cooking, right food, sattvic meals, food to reduce your particular dosha, certain herbs for body and mind to strengthen immunity, Brahma Rasayana, or even ashwagandha, or even Brahmi. There's so many things the Ayurvedic doctors can tell you. Ayurvedic massages, the use of oils externally. Our immunity is also connected to the skin, and we need to have a thick skin to deal with the world at both psychological and physical levels. And we must continue to live in harmony with nature, with our doshic constitution, develop sattva guna, honor the body and mind as our temple, in which our inner being, our true self, or our divine essence can manifest. And ultimately, to strengthen our immunity, we must be connected to the Paramatma within, Ishvara. There is a universal force. That universal consciousness dwells within us. We are connected to the whole of life and the whole of nature. We must have that fearlessness. Our inner being can overcome anything. Body and mind have their limitations, but even death and sorrow we can transcend, and we must remember to help others. When we bring in the motivation to serve, to care, the seva, that also brings us a greater energy from the universe as a whole. So let us take this pandemic as an opportunity to improve our health and immunity, our psychological immunity, well-being, and remove us, take us beyond our emotional and even intellectual limitations, awakening a deeper spirituality. And we need to return to yoga as a science of consciousness and prana so that we can deal with our artificial information technology era. And we can work with that technology as an instrument. It has wonderful potentials for us, but we must also honor our organic nature, our doshic prakriti, our mental prakriti, our inner being, self atma. We must also honor nature, para brahma. We must have our ecological responsibility as well as our responsibility for all creatures and all human beings. So let us use this challenge for a new cultural, civilizational, medical, and spiritual paradigm, unity in yoga, integration through yoga, healing through Ayurveda, so that we can use this to move into a new planetary era of greater well-being for all. For that, we need work, sacrifice, efforts. We see so many people doing such wonderful work. Your organization is also involved in that. And whether it's COVID warriors, whether it's all the people helping, the doctors, the nurses, the just the well wishes of the family, we have to honor all these energies, give them our prayers, our mantras, our contemplation. And through this crisis, we can grow in awareness, consciousness for all humanity and create a better science, technology, and overall way of life that benefits everyone and that reconnects us once more with the universal Dharma, which is there is only one self in all beings. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Tat Sat. With these words, I will close my talk. I again thank CGI Chandigarh for inviting me on this very wonderful and important day and for this very crucial topic. But we can master the body, the mind, and the outer world if we all work together inwardly and outwardly and affirm our common yogic heritage and way of life. Hari Om.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. David Fraley, for an exciting and compelling discussion on the Patanjali Sutras. You simplified them so nicely, all the way from Yama Niyama to inward-looking mind called the Pratyahara. And the beauty was that you defined the energy into doshas and pranas, which is very, very interesting. That was a very calming, very smooth, seamless, and very inspiring talk. Thanks a lot for sparing the time. I will now move to the next stage of our session. And not before I thank on behalf of all of us to Professor Meenu Singh for organizing this telemedicine's facilities to make this digital interaction a possibility for our faculty, staff, and students, and also all the other viewers and COVID warriors who are watching us in India and outside India as well. We are now joined by one of our very academic dean. It is Professor G.D. Puri. He's a professor of anesthesia and intensive care. You can easily spot him by looking at a beautiful place he's positioned himself. And the backdrop, you can see the waters. He's one of the very academic and research-oriented professor. And I say this because he's among probably the only ones who discovered and conceptualized the first practical closed loop anesthesia delivery system, the CLADS. This is the first one and was also patented. And he's in charge of the COVID block in our Premier Institute, looking after the patients who are coming and being discharged with us. He's also the Academy member, fellow of the National Academy of Medical Sciences, and the prestigious fellow of Pulmonary Vascular Research Institute, London. He has numerous publications to himself, besides the patent that I just mentioned. He also popularized the perioperative use of TEE and established first of its training program in the young cardiac anesthesial. So over to Dr. Puri. I invite you to please give your concluding remarks.
Namaskar. I thank Padma Bhushan Vamdeva, Dr. Frawley, for an enlightening talk on the subject of yoga and Ayurveda psychology and its essence on the 6th International Day of Yoga. Thank you very much, sir, for sparing your time and to be with us and our faculty and residents to give the thoughts about how the yoga, which is an ancient science, well proven with the evidence, how it can improve the immunity in this time when we need to build immunity for the people to fight this pandemic. Very beautifully conceptualized the mind and as a factory, biochemical factory, and how to balance this factory so that it does not produce harmful chemicals and useful chemicals can be used for overall improvement of the various bodily functions, including immunity of the body. How to counter the negativity and to stay with the good ecosystem. How the brain the factory can be influenced not only by the environmental factors, both physically as an entry of contaminant into the brain, but also entry through the various five senses from the eyes, ears, nose, smell, taste. So how these things can affect this factory and how these things can affect the neural outflow from the brain, which can be used to improve the immunity or harm the immunity depending upon how you control this balance. And very beautifully, this has been done by the explaining various yogas, various, every day we have this session organized by Professor Anand on this yoga, various common yogic exercises. They're not only helpful for the physical improvement directly, but indirectly through improvement of the mind. It affects the physical as well as immunological systems of the body. And these are very important in this lockdown and post-lockdown era when the people are either forcibly or for the sake of preventing spread of infection, they are isolated from each other and they don't get enough support, mental support in this time. What we have seen in our COVID hospital, where the patients were kept in isolation to avoid any cross-contamination or infection, how they were feeling lonely and how this yoga exercises and how the communication through the remote, CCTVs could encourage them to do the yoga and how their mental balance improved and how many of them those who were thinking of doing suicide, their mind was calm, not only to treat the patients, but also the people who are taking care of these patients. They're also under very psychological stress. And this yoga helped us a lot in balancing their mind and improving not only their the mental balance, but also the outcome as far as the taking care of the patients is concerned. PGI is known for its academic activities and as a part of supporting the yoga and the ancient science, a lot of research projects are being undertaken by various faculty And even myself did studies to do the preoperative calming exercises using yoga as one of the methods instead of using drugs to calm the mind. And we found that it not only decreases the anesthetic requirement, but also it improves the pain, decreases the pain medicines post-operatively. We have a journal which is dedicated for the integrative medicine, and we publish articles related to this yoga, integrative medicine. And Dr. Akshayanand and his team are working tirelessly to spread the knowledge as well as the practice of yoga amongst not only the general public but also among the scientists. For some reason, initially they are not as receptive, but with the development of evidence-based medicine and evidence-based advantages of yoga and its exercises, we have got very good support, and it's being accepted as one of the methods of management as a part of allopathic medicine. With this, I must thank you again, Professor Frawely, and Professor Nand, Professor Jagatram, who is always helping this, not only the yoga, but also all academic activities institute as a good team leader. We thank you also for allowing us to organize this event on this 6th International Yoga Day. And with this, I thank you, Dr. Frawley, and the team of Dr. Akshayanand for organizing this and being a part of us. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you, Professor Puri, for very nice concluding remarks. So we're going to come to a close of the International Day of Yoga celebrations for 2020, which was purely digital. I thank all the three leaders in their fields, Dr. Frawley, our revered director, Dr. Jagatram, and Dr. G.D. Puri, and thanking Dr. Meenu Singh for providing us the facilities. We hope to reconnect again on the International Day of Yoga again with more Ayurveda and yoga psychology ingrained into our activities, as very lucidly pointed out by Dr. Fraley. Thank you very much. Namaskar from all of us from PGI.